So at level 3 of this quest on agile leadership, we're talking about how could we be comfortable with change? How can we begin to build in ourselves a natural sense of calmness during a change process? How do we do that? And therefore, how do we become agile? Let's take a look at a couple of ideas here. Leadership is, of course, enabling our people to be comfortable with change. The good agile leader is comfortable with change themselves and enables the team to be completely comfortable with change. And some basic understanding of how people respond to change is really helpful here. And I think the theories of Daniel Kahneman really do help us. This is a really interesting look at the gains and the losses in terms of change that may happen to us. And what Kahneman did was took a look at the way that people look at the future in terms of benefits and in terms of losses, in terms of positives, in terms of minuses. What is fascinating is that for the same amount of gain or the same amount of loss perceived by a person, let's imagine you look at the future and you think, there's some good gains here, there's a few losses, and they were about equal. The actual unhappiness levels that you can see from the orange and the blue lines are quite different. Happiness marginally increases if we think of a gain. But if we think of an equivalent loss, happiness plummets. And this is his view that we are primed to a position where our natural view of losses in the future is much more negative than our view of gains of the future. Our job as leaders is to recognize that our views of the future are just habitual perceptions. They're not necessarily true. It often works out that is not true. I think there was a very famous quote, which I love. I'll have to think about who it was that did that quote. But the quote was, I have had a lot of troubles in my life, most of which didn't happen. That's a fantastic quote. And I'm thinking that it adapts very precisely to this model here. Most of your people will be looking at change in the future and responding to a perception of what the future might be, not the reality. How do we become comfortable with change? We recognize that disposition in ourselves to view the future as possibly more negative than positive. We correct that because we say, look, actually, we're here now. We've been through this before. The benefits are as good, at least as good as the negatives. We will work through it. And I'm going to take a different view of the future. So how do we be comfortable with change? Have a realistic view of the future, not the natural view of the future, which is a little more pessimistic. So there's some thoughts on how we can be comfortable with change and how we can begin to prepare our people to be comfortable with change, and then we can all respond in a positive, agile manner.